All right, I think we're going to get started here. Some people are still trickling in, but we seem to have mass turnout at this point. So the original name of our talk here was Security Use Case Operations. That's the one that Ryan gave me when he first said, hey, Lisa, I want to do this talk at Splunk. And I'm like, yeah, but that's the most boring use case. I mean, use cases, that's so boring. Because I go to all these security conferences and I'm like, use case, security use case, security use case. And I'm like, boring. So then I added like pandas, bears, and sandworms because I was like, let's make it more interesting, exciting. And then they didn't put my fancy little full title in any of the documentation anywhere. I'm like, so sad. Where you have the remote.
Good. All right. Here we go. This is a standard disclaimer. I'm sure you've seen this a couple times today already. Anything we say may or may not be baked into the Splunk product, so just pretend like we're not saying what we're saying. I don't know. There's a disclaimer. We're good with that?
Go ahead.
And next.
So very briefly, we're going to go over who we are, overview of security at Bechtel, why we use Splunk, and a couple of use cases that we use frequently at Bechtel. And Bechtel is a large construction civil engineering project management company. It's the fourth largest privately owned company in the United States. We build very, very large infrastructure type projects. The Dulles Metro Rail is the first picture there. That's in DC. The second one is the airport in Qatar. We just finished last year or in 2014. The final picture there that you see, interestingly, is the cleanup going on at Chernobyl reactor number 4, which, like, the amount of projects that Bechtel does around the world is just really impressive. And you're like, okay, fine, you're not an IT company. What do you need Splunk for? Next slide.
We'll get to that transition. So we're going to talk about us for a moment here. My name is Ryan Chapman. I'm a networking security monitoring analyst at Bechtel. I'm essentially Lisa's underling, really, is the deal. But I'm an incident handler. I get to rock the incident commander role when we have events, which is fantastic, and my experience with Splunk really helps in that endeavor. I also function as a CERT SOC liaison, so essentially when the SOC needs technical support or assistance, they come to me and I ask them the question, have you checked Splunk? And they say, yeah, and I say, no, did you check Splunk? And then they go check Splunk, and then problem solved, essentially. So.
All right. I am the security unicorn because if you haven't noticed, security is a very male-dominated industry. So I got to pick my title on my business card, and I'm like, security unicorn, because there's not very many of us. And now we've actually hired more women at Bechtel, so then I had to make a private little chat room for all the women because I'm like, wow, we actually have more than just me? That's cool. So yay, that. I am the team lead for the network security monitoring portion of the security aspects at Bechtel. I am also the Splunk administrator, which is loads of fun. I also, because I'm the Splunk administrator and running into light fixtures is awesome, I guess I won't hover near the wall. Because I am the Splunk administrator, I also tend to break Splunk a lot, much to the dismay of the SOC, who's just like, what are you doing, Lisa? I'm like, testing something. They get all annoyed with me, which means I'm also the person who fixes Splunk. So that pretty much wraps up my day right there. I broke it, I fixed it, I answered a question. Next slide. So security at Bechtel, to go back to my transition, which utterly failed earlier, security at Bechtel. They kind of want us to go over the background. How are you doing it before Splunk? Well, to be perfectly honest, we were not doing it well before Splunk. Bechtel had a security team before the existence of my security team. My security team came about in 2011. So obviously there was a very large incident that occurred at Bechtel to result in hiring an entire full-time CERT team, an entire full-time SOC team at our company. Can't go into serious details about that, but let's just say that was a lot of fun. There was a lot of work. I'm still there. We're still doing Splunk, and it's still pretty awesome working there. So, yay. But basically, we had like the two guys, and they were like doing the audit compliant sort of security, checkbox security, which is really not going to save you from anything except for an auditor. Next. After the remediation, after we had this huge, lovely incident, our new security, what was Kelsey's title? Kelsey came through and he set up our organization into 3 separate sections, more or less. So we have expertise in host forensics, malware analysis, network security monitoring, and then we have the overall incident coordinator, who's the point of contact, or who's the person who wrangled all the other people into doing whatever it is they're supposed to do. And then we have our tier 1 and tier 2 guys. It's the SOC. They're the daily frontline guys. We love them because they handle all the stuff that doesn't get escalated up to the CERT. They hate us. But it's a work in progress. Every once in a while we switch people, like some people go to the CERT, some people come back to the SOC, whatever. It's kind of fun. But that's the trouble with running a large security organization. Next slide.
Cool. So this is our security stack post-remediation. Essentially what we did is we developed 2 different layers. We have a network layer, and then we have a host side layer of protection. The idea being, say a host goes off-site, it can completely circumvent all the network layer stuff that we have, right? You take your laptop to a mobile hotspot or something, you become infected, you come back onto the network, and then all of a sudden we have the host side that says, no, stop it. So over here, starting at the top left-hand side, we have our standard firewalls. We'll just call them our older generation firewalls. Full packet capture throughout the enterprise, all of our 7 major data centers. We have up to about 30 days of data retention in all of those, so we can pull all the captures we want. Application firewall, just think of layer 6, or if you will, the next generation firewall, the logs from which are fantastic in Splunk. DNS protection, we just offload the risk transference to a third party who runs that for us. Email blocking is done through the Cisco iron ports, pretty standard stuff. Network event parsing. We use Bro, the IDS, to make our logs look pretty, essentially. So if anyone here use Bro, see some hands? Yeah! Oh, got a clap! That's what I'm talking about. So we get like Bro underscore DNS, Bro underscore HTTP, and those are easy to read through and to correlate with other, like for example, HTTP, comparing it to the ISA logs, comparing that to the PAN logs, multiple points of reference for those types of things. And then behavior analysis is like malware runtime analysis. So think of FireEye, Wildfire, those types of devices. And then down on the host side, we have APT detection. This was originally made for management, sorry. So we detect APT. We have this little thing.
Wait. Isn't this a drinking game you're supposed to drink when you
that's right, yeah. Drink up, go. Give me a drink. So basically, IOC sweeps. Okay, think of mirror, but we don't use mirror, but just think of sweeping hosts for indicators, right? And then you have forensics, we have Encased Enterprise, we have Google Rapid Response, and we can float through all our hosts, even if they're off-site, and ping them and do forensic analysis, which is always fun. For antivirus, we use Semantic Enterprise Protection. Everyone needs some AV, right? And then for log forwarding, we use something called Windows Logging Service, WLS, which, anyone here familiar with Snare? You're familiar with Snare, right? Right? Well, not as much? Okay. Snare on steroids is WLS, and I'll show you some examples coming up. And then for intense monitoring, think of things like Carbon Black, right? We use one called Counterattack, same concept idea. All these logs and all the other logs generated from all of our other systems, they all funnel into Splunk and makes it so much easier for us to do our job. So with that in mind, why do we use Splunk? Well, because it's better than grep. It's a pretty simple question. When it comes down to, should we buy that license, right? Where should you go, yeah, do we pay you for the license, right? It's like, well, is it better? Is grep better? Right? Can I have egrep or whatever letter prefix of grep do a better job? And in this case, no. We have 2.35 terabytes of data flowing through on a daily basis. So because of that, we want a great log aggregation utility that's going to help us answer the 5 W's. Who, what, when, where, why. And then our job is to answer the how and also to stop it from happening in the future, right? So we use it also for alert generation. 25% of the tickets that come into our security operations center come directly from Splunk. Be they ones that we just developed on our own. For example, something like, oh, you shouldn't have an executable running out of the user's temporary folder, right? Why would that be a thing? You set an alert up for that, generates tickets for your SOC, that type of deal, right? So more on that coming up a little later.
All right, this is my favorite slide because I got to use little caricatures. If you've been in security at any point in time, or for any length of time, you've noticed that the threat intel providers of the world, they give their adversary groups these cute little monikers like Fancy Bear, Pink Panda, Sandworm, etc., sort of semi-racist in nature, actually, because we're categorizing threats based on countries, based on animals. It's awesome. Anyways, they get a little confusing, but to say the least, why Splunk? Because we are Bechtel and we have adversaries all over the world that are actually looking at our data. Because we have such big projects in all the different countries, including stuff in China and Russia, etc., it makes us very appealing. It's fun to pick on the big company. And we get them all. Like, I remember I used to work at a utility company back when what was that, Sandworm? No. What was the utility thing, Drew? Sorry, what? Not Sandworm. The one from a few years back, the big super duper one that did everything was created by multiple states. Or us. Stuxnet, sorry, yes, I now have heard it.
No credit for you.
Yes, Stuxnet. Remember Stuxnet? It's awesome, and it can do all these cool things if you're like a nuclear power plant in Iran. Not a big problem when you're running a US-based electrical company. You're like, Stuxnet, who cares? Now I go and I work for Bechtel, and there's like Stuxnet on the network. I'm like, what? Oh, wait, we have stuff in those countries. So it's a lot of fun from the security perspective. Next slide.
All right.
And this is my obligatory quote because people ask me, we wouldn't be able to do our jobs without Splunk. Bechtel obviously was not doing its job without Splunk before they had Splunk. We are now like living and breathing the Splunk in our security operations center, in our incident response. It's all interwoven. We have all the data. We're starting to bring in the operations teams, everybody, and trying to get more and more users on Splunk. But it is just like, if Splunk goes down, we're all screwed in terms of our ability to secure the company. Next slide.
Okay, we're going to go over some use cases. The first case that I chose to use, it's not necessarily as juicy example. I did a presentation at Live in 14, and it was about how we track these attackers using some intelligence, and we were able to see them laterally moving around the network, and it was so fun and cool. This is very different. However, it highlights how you can utilize Splunk to really help you out when you don't have a whole lot of information to work with. Okay, so this is the typical, a project site comes up to us, well, they send us an email, and they're thousands of miles away, and said, hey, we have these computers, and they're all infected, and Symantec's not finding the problem. Fix it. Oh, okay. How long have they been infected? Oh, like a month. Okay, why are you telling us right now? Like, what's going on with that? So essentially, after probing, we get 5 host names that are currently hooked up to a test bench, and we get a note that they're seeing a high occurrence of files with .trashes and their file names being executed. Anyone familiar with .trashes? We're going to go over it if you're not. All right, check it out. So the idea first up is they're saying Symantec's not catching it. Well, hold on. Is Symantec finding it, i.e. catching it, but just saying, I don't care, right? Symantec has an option for actual action being left alone. So we're going to check the logs to see if action left alone is a thing. To do that, we run a search. Let's see, you get a little pointer here. Ooh, here you go. Our time frame, looking in SEP index, we took out the source types for like system accounting, you know, like I downloaded definitions update. I don't care about all that. I just want to know about hits. By the way, what we're doing here, notice how we're specifying an index and then we're specifying source types. Just make a macro for that called like SEP hits so you don't have to type that out every single time. So a good example of where macros can come into play, we use that now. And then essentially we're looking down here for left alone, right? So we get nothing. Ah, man. But here's the thing. You want to avoid falling into the pit, if you will, of false negatives. Okay, what if we're not getting any logs at all? And just because I didn't get any results for my targeted search, I decided, oh, well, you know, that's not the case. Well, hold on. To verify, we take out left alone and we run the search again. We do verify that we have logs. So we're seeing things, look on the right-hand side, things are being quarantined, they're being deleted. So yes, these 5 particular targeted hosts are sending logs from Symantec to us. That's good, that's very important to know. What else do we have? Well, we have a Hail Mary, like literally just iForm pulling back and just throwing it up there. The Windows logging service, for every process execution, which is Windows event code 4688, it will log the hash of the file that's doing the execution. So what we do is we take basically a 3-day period, we grab all the MD5s out of there by specifying in WLS event code 4688, and then we're just doing a stats count by MD5, nothing special to be honest, and then deduping the suckers a little later. And basically we take all these hashes. Now we have this big, huge dump of hashes, so what do we do with that? Well, a couple things. One, we have a really, really good tool that we wrote internally, but I didn't write it, so I put my tool on here instead because it's my damn presentation. So this particular tool here, you give it a dump of MD5s, and it basically just it checks virus total, it checks eyesight. We're really big on intel analysis, so it's just one example of one of the tools we have. Anyone here have virus total? Like use like virus total intelligence, right? You just go to the virus total intelligence search hash section to dump your list, whatever. It's same deal, right? So in this example, down at the bottom right-hand side, you'll see that one of the hashes had a virus total detection ratio of 11 out of 54. It ended up not being what we were currently dealing with. It was like a little bonus. It's like, hey, look at that too. So, all right, let's go back to the whole trashes thing. Anyone here familiar with the hierarchical file system, HFS or HFS Plus? It's commonly used in OS X, and in fact, it was used in classic OS. So if you look here, this is my terminal open. We have volumes. This is a USB drive right here, and then we have .trashes. Every time you delete something from a removable drive that's using HFS or HFS Plus, it takes your user ID, and in this current session, my user ID was 501. I've shown that down here by just running the ID command. It takes that 3-digit, well, usually 3-digit number, it can be, and then it pops in whatever you deleted. So in my case here, we have this deleted folder that shows up right there, right? Now, the problem is that I had this knowledge previously because I've just been using the Mac for years and years and years. Now, the problem is that our user base is not Mac specific. We are not a Mac shop, if you will. All of us use MacBook Pros, but our users, almost like, what, 99% Windows or something? So a high occurrence of .trashes showing up on removable drives on a project site? That's not right. What's going on there? So let's find out what's going on there. Let's find out first by looking at which sites are currently affected. One way to do that is, again, to look at process execution, event code 4688, and specifically look for in the command line, just simply .trashes. Okay, literally *.trashes*. That's it, nothing fancy. And then we're just using a little regex here to pull out the site code. We use three-letter site codes, we can say that. A lot of people do that. And then we're basically just evaling them to upper, doing a stats count, and we're trying to get a feel for who's seeing more .trashes in their command line execution. Now you'll notice we see 3 sites. The first site was the site that contacted us, but we see 2 other sites. One thing that we notice right away when it just comes to basic data correlation, right, cause and effect type of thing, these 3 sites are all in very remote locations where broadband connectivity from one project site to another, like there's multiple encampments around this big, huge place that they're building, right? They don't have very good network connectivity. Maybe a DSL line that runs up the mountains and gets cut every time they have some weird inclemental weather or something. So that's keep paying attention to that. That's going to come up a little later. So let's be a little more specific and find out what's really executing. So by looking at 4688.trashes and then tabling it out rather than sticking everything into stats, what we're able to see is that what's executing is the Windows scripting host engine, WScript. You might be familiar with WScript and CScript. It's running something out of .trashes, 3 numbers, and then some lowercase letters .js. So WScript can run VBS and JavaScript. If you're not familiar with that, it seems kind of odd, but it can. So we're looking at that like, that's not right. What's that about? So we're trying to find out, well, what is this? Well, at the time, this did not exist. At the time, this signature here was not related to the samples that we were able to find because we did this search here. But we eventually submitted over to Symantec, and they provided back with momentary, like 20 minutes, right, saying, oh, hey, that looks like pros like fan, and for that matter, there's also another sample called bondit. And they said, that's pretty much what that's doing. And we looked at it, and we're like, yeah, that's pretty much it. So we get the signature to pick it up. However, the goal then is to find out, well, what do we have to clean up, right? The remediation, what do we have to do here? How many of these hosts are infected? And for that matter, how long have they been infected? So without something like Splunk, good luck with all this. So I took our search all the way back to January 2014, just to go back pretty far. And then command line trashes, but I want to be very, very specific because I don't care if trashes is in there. I specifically want to see trashes / 3 numbers / and then what I use, 4 to 8 lowercase or uppercase letters .js, being very specific to this exact pattern, right? And by doing that and running some event stats and deduping, we get this list here, and you'll notice that in March of 2014, we had a slight occurrence, if you will. It's basically just one host, to be honest. But right after that, it changed host names, if you're wondering. But I see there's 2. Trust me, there's 1. But then after that, starting like perfectly on December 1st of 2014, is just this flurry, just this wildfire of like, hey, you want a USB drive? Yeah! And then just sharing, going nuts, right? So these sites just went crazy with this worm that's propagating via USB. So what do? We can't just tell the project sites, oh yeah, go clean these hosts. I mean, by the way, I had to cut some of the presentation down, right? We found, I don't know how many hundreds of hosts. It was almost 300. The number's coming up a little later. 287, I believe, were remediated. But we can't just remediate the host because these USB drives are just floating around at the sites, right? Well, the problem is that, let me pull back one sec. The problem is that these sites, like I said, they have really bad broadband connectivity. So what they're doing is they're implementing the whole sneaker net idea, right? They're just taking, I mean, and I'm talking like very confidential like drawings and construction, like yay, and just flying around USB drives everywhere. That's not good. So the goal was, well, can we identify the USB drives? Are there just like a handful? That would be easy. Trust me, they were not a handful, but let's just check anyway, right? So if you look at event 20,001 in WLS, it gives you basically any type of USB enumeration. I didn't really want every single USB enumeration. What I specifically wanted was disk storage. So we switched over to using semantic enterprise logs, and in there's an event type NIX USB, and it shows all the USB store devices. Anyone here do Windows forensics? Are you familiar with when you look at the what was I talking about? USB store 2 registry key, right? You pulled out the reg ripper, you see all different mount points for right? So that's what this provides to us. And then at first it's a bit jumbled, so we kind of just fixed that up using a little regex, and now we just have this automatically done, transformed, propped, and pretty. Transformed, propped, and pretty. You gotta make that like a, sorry. All right, so we have vendor, whoop, go back. Yeah, I know. Vendor, product, and revision. So we were able to enumerate how many devices essentially were involved in this whole infection, where they were used, and we were able to correlate it from site location to site location. I would show you what the numbers looked like, but it was just horrific. I mean, literally there were thousands. I didn't even know they made this many USB drives in a given year or something. It was nuts. There were drives everywhere. One host had 20 brand new mount points from USB store in one day. Like, I mean, how many hours do you work in a day to have 20 freaking USB drives? I don't get that. But whatever. It got to the point where we were able to, look at the second section here first. We were able to implement USB drive policy change. We were able to drive that because of what we were able to find in Splunk. So literally what we did is we shut off GPO. We just said, nope, no USB drives. And of course, everyone lost their minds over it at the site. It's like, are you kidding? You can't just, we just did. So when we turned it off, the goal was then to get IT, the project IT, in charge, user education, blah, blah. So what we did is we did that, and then we cleaned up the drives, and it was very simple. If that's a Bechtel drive that you're plugging into your machine, give it to us, or well, the project IT staff, give it to them, let them clean it up, or burn it, and then if it's your personal one, take it home, stop putting it in our machines. So again, right now, go back up at the top. I should have flipped the order, whatever. About 287 hosts, but more importantly, if you look at the very bottom, ongoing save search alerts. This is, again, goes back to the 25% of the things that our SOC sees, they all come from Splunk. We saw this and we set up SEP AV hits for when SEP does identify, was it pros like fan and bondat? And also when it identifies basically the parameters, like the save search we had to find all the different hosts that were infected. Even if semantic doesn't have a signature, we can still see one of those very similar characteristics, and that fires off. And since then, we've cleaned 40 more hosts. So that was a total win, and that was the type that just started from like, hey, the machines are broken, right? And because of Splunk, we were able to fix that all up. All right.
All right, use case number 2. We have a question.
Question. 20 days? No, that was the same host that had 20 USB drives plugged in on a day. Yeah, wow.
How long did it take you guys to do that?
How long did it take us? Actually, surprisingly quick. Was this like we stayed on it for about a week and a half, and I'm going to say about 7 days. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, how long did it take from the initial finding out what the situation was to rectifying the whole thing? Well, to be honest, because we had to block USB, there was a policy thing in play. So from our side, it took maybe 3 days. So that's the pretty answer. All right.
Another question.
Wait, let's do questions at the end, right?
Okay.
Yes? No, yes?
I don't know. Can you remember your question till the end?
Did you consider it an insider threat? I mean, 20 drives on a single host in one day is a lot.
Oh, yeah. No, that wasn't just the one host. I mean, all these hosts had like 10 to 12 a day. Like, I think they just like played a game. Like, how many USB drives can you plug in today? I don't know. It was ridiculous, man.
Maybe it was a shared drive computer.
Yeah, the question was, do you think it was possibly an insider with 20 different USB drives plugged in on a given day to one host? And it's like, no, that was just happened to be the highest. There were 10, 15 on all kinds of hosts. Okay.
Let's go over the use case number 2, which is fairly quick. This one is, oh, I get the power too.
Yeah.
Yay. This one is vetting threat intel. As you know, in security, there's intel everywhere. Your buddy has intel, the blogs have intel, Twitter has intel, companies you worked with 2 years ago have intel. And you're like looking at all this data and you're like, what the hell do I do with all this data? So we like to strip them down into indicators of compromise. So here's an example of a website. It's about the Nikon APT site, or APT threat, and it's from XYZ website. Here's another one from FireEye, and here's one from Palo Alto. So like I said, threat intel's everywhere. You can also get paid prescription stuff. So we at Bechtel like to automate the crap out of things because we don't like doing the same monotonous task over and over again. So somebody in our organization created this handy little script to extract all the IOCs out of a piece of intel. So it automatically, when you put the intel into the ticket, will automatically pull out all the domains, all the URLs, all the hashes, etc., and basically update our ticket with all the extracted IOCs so that the analyst doesn't have to sit there and read the entire thing and figure out where all these things are, and maybe they missed one, etc. It's pretty sweet. The SOC loves it.
You said I could jump in.
Yes.
Just as a note, this is open sourced. It's called IOC Triage. If you want to know more about it, see us after.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing that it does is the IOC Triage portion, which combines some of our internal tools, the IOCS, which is a database of all of our hashes, the first time and the last time we've seen a hash on our network or a domain. Actually, I think we just have that for domains, right? URLs. The hash one is a future release. We have WAM, which is what we're using to feed all of our block IP addresses and domains to our Palo Alto infrastructure. And then Trac is our ticketing systems. So it'll take those indicator lists, and in this example, they're just domain names, and it'll check our existing tickets. Have we had any tickets related to this? Is the URL already blocked? What were the related tickets, et cetera? When was it created? When's it updated? When's it going to go away? If it's a block targeted one, we usually leave it in there for like, 100 years or something?
100 years.
But the normal, just run-of-the-mill sort of spam things have lesser time frames. The next thing that it's going to do with hashes is it's going to look them up against the National Software Registry list. So that way you can easily eliminate valid files because they're legitimate hashes. And otherwise, it'll just tell us, where have we seen this hash before in all the tickets that we've done? It's sort of just like helping us draw together data points and make us more efficient. Macros are awesome. Macros sort of require you to use the SIM, the Common Information Model. As the Splunk administrator and as somebody who didn't do it when they first started doing Splunk, you need to make sure all of your stuff is in the SIM format so that you can query across multiple indices and not have to do bullshit aliases. It makes your life so much easier, and it really makes it easier when you're onboarding a new data source if you put it in the SIM format correctly the first time around rather than the second time around. But these are things you learn. Anyways, we have a lot of indices with a lot of different, a lot of which have hashes in them. And since hashes are like a plethora of information you can get from all over these intel sources, we like to search them in our source and see if we've ever seen it. So here's an example of a hash macro. The exploded out version there is what the actual macro is doing. And then we're just using a simple query to search for a few hashes to see if it's in our data. In this example, you can tell that we pulled up one of the hashes from the search. So that's a really easy way. Now we can determine what machines or machines have this hash, and we can investigate further and pivot on that data point. It's pretty awesome. I believe the hash macro is used pretty frequently in the SOC, or they're making shit up. Another useful macro is our web traffic. We have because we're a large organization, et cetera, and we have some organizations that are run by other parts of the company, et cetera. We have a lot of web traffic. We have PAN traffic. We have our bro traffic. We have some ISA proxy servers that won't die. We even have some WebSense. I think we're finally getting rid of the WebSense soon, just so we'll have a more standardized set of data across the interface. Nothing wrong with WebSense itself. But in this event, we want to know if we've ever seen this Western Digital URL, which is probably fairly common, so it's going to show up. But here, you can see if we use this macro, we've gotten logs from Palo Alto, we've gotten logs from ISO, and we've gotten logs from Bro. You can do further analysis and determine if this was the same machine or different machines, et cetera. And depending on where you are in the network, you may or may not be in one of these log sources. It's just sort of our overcomplicated environment. But this is another super useful thing. So when you're making things to help your security analysts in there, you want to create macros for things so they don't forget to look in the ISO proxy logs, or they don't forget to look in some other random log. Because, you know, try as you might, they're not going to remember all your fancy little indexes. And we have indexes for all different types of data because of role-based control and making sure that the rest of the company doesn't see data they don't need to see, et cetera. But in security, we see it all. So that's the way that works. Another thing that we recently started using this year is Splice. Again, back to IOCs. There's a lot of them. We had Mir. It was doing sweeps across our enterprise to determine if XYZ IOC was spotted on our network. We got rid of Mir because it was sort of special. And we're now using mostly Splice to handle parts of what the functionality Mir was providing us. So one of the things that we liked about Splice was it has good IOC parsing for the sticks in IOC formats, and it stores it in the happy little Mongo database in the back end, and then you can do way more stuff with it. It's easy to toggle the indicators on and off, and there's a fast way to, problem is the guy who did the Splice integration is right there, and I am not the person who did the Splice integration. But anyways, there are functions of Splice that we really liked, and we're really using it. And then there's other parts of it, like the portion where it actually alerts on the IOCs. We kind of killed it because we had way too many IOCs. So we had to do something else on the back end to check all of our indicators. But from an indicator management standpoint, Splice is really cool. And from the Splunk security, we don't actually use Splunk Enterprise Security at Bechtel. We're like the only people in security who aren't, apparently. But anyways, I know it's now baked into 3.3 and 3.4, so if you have indicators and you're looking for integration, make sure you check out Splice, or make sure you check out the Splunk Enterprise Security integration with IOCs, because there's a lot of useful things you can do with that.
Let me jump in real quick. Notice how she said we don't use Splunk Enterprise Security, right? Anyone here just attend Monzi's talk at 1 o'clock? Where he was talking about, do you remember where he was saying that the difficulty level and time essentially is, right? We're the ones down here who are taking forever and making it really difficult on ourselves.
No, we were in the middle.
We have some apps. That's right, we do have some apps.
Dude, if there's a TA, because they're already SIM compliant, totally use the TA.
We like those.
If you're doing parsing and you're like, I wonder if somebody has already written a parser to extract these logs, friggin' check Splunk base or hit up your Splunk rep, because there's probably a TA already out there for it with all the parsing already done. And you don't have to sit there and make funny regexes unless you have weird logs. Maybe your application logs. You're going to have to write special parsers for that shit. But the average security equipment piece of device type thing, you shouldn't need to write a whole bunch of fancy parsers for that. So now we get to our takeaways.
Cool. So the recap of the 5 takeaways, I have to go back to it. I've said it, I know, a couple times already, but saved searches are money for us. It's really where we get a lot of utility from Splunk. Example, we have an incident. Say we have a real incident spins up. I'll give you an example. One we recently had. Hold on. We didn't vet that, did we? Let me choose a different one.
I don't know.
Adobe Flash. Remember the Adobe Flash 0 days, right? 3119, the CVEs were really annoying if you had to deal with that. Well, in those situations, basically there were indicators from the TCP stream of when, and we can utilize Bro HTTP for the headers that are popping in that are specifying, I want to target this version of Flash, right? You have to have this version. Things like that. After we've handled the incident, we've done all of our patching, we've handled everything, we have a saved search now going just to see for those characteristics. And it's like every incident we have just builds on this knowledge base that we have of ongoing continual saved searches. So very important to make sure you leverage those and don't just let the intel die with a given event.
And the other thing that we need to harp on is macros are your friends. We love macros. They make not having to remember really long, complicated Splunk bullshit SPL stuff easy, right? So if you have a bunch of queries that you're doing all the time, you might want to consider making macros out of them to simplify your life. The other thing, SIM. Use a TA. Use anything that says it's SIM compliant. It's awesome. It takes a lot of the work and headache away from you.
And then again, avoid false negatives. Just because you get 0 results doesn't mean that the logs that you're receiving, well, it doesn't mean you're receiving the logs in the first place, is what I'm getting at. Just because you don't see an individual hit for a targeted query, take out some of the specifications and see if you even have the logs coming in. And for that matter, kind of a secondary item to this is how many, and don't lie, how many people honestly monitor the logs that are incoming to Splunk? Like how many of you could tell me right now if a particular log stops coming in? Right, that's not a lot of hands. And I know, I ran into that with my own thing. Yeah, be very careful for that. Whether you're using Splunk on Splunk or some other type of analytics, whatever it is, verify. You don't want to have your incident handler saying, hey, we don't have logs for so-and-so for 16 days. You should be the one within an hour or two that's like, oh, that's weird, and take care of that.
As a Splunk administrator, that's my worst nightmare. It's like, oh, that was supposed to be logging? Crap.
Oops.
Now I got to go figure out what happened to it. And it's a long, complicated tracing process with all of our nice, complex systems. The other thing that we want to push here is there is so much information about Splunk on the Splunk website, on the Splunk blog, on Splunk Base. There's a bunch of apps. Like, I constantly troll Splunk Base for new apps, just looking for when stuff comes up, because I'm like, oh, look, we're using that product. Maybe we should go check out their app. Maybe they're doing something cooler with their data than we're doing with their data. It happens all the time where I've been working on something and then I'm like, let me go check Splunk Base, and then I'm like, oh, I don't need to do any of this work. Let me go back. And then Splunk Answers, usually if I'm trying to figure out something, somebody else has already asked the question on Splunk Answers. And then I don't really participate in the IRC, but I hear the IRC is also really fabulous for answers. If you have any questions, you can hit us both up on Twitter. Those are our Twitter aliases there. I'm really, really easy to find because there's not a lot of Tawfalls in the world. He's a little bit harder to find because what, average white male? Questions?
Nice.
Yep.
All right, so that's it, by the way.
We
Any
have no
questions?
questions.
If you have questions, there's a microphone in the middle. If you want to use it, that's great. But if you have a good shouting voice, go for it. Go. Yeah. So the question was raw packet capture and encryption. How do we handle that?
My microphone's off. Raw packet capture, we're using these in-dace taps at the data center on the egress points. And then that's feeding our bro parsers. And what was the second half of that?
Encryption.
Encryption? What about encryption? Well, we had SSL inspection for a while going on with Palo Alto, but then we recently had to turn that off. So you can do it. It's just a little difficult. Yeah. What system are we using for ticketing? We're using our home-baked version of Trac. It's an average ticketing system that we've sort of messed with and made it work for us. If you've had a better incident ticketing system that works for security, I would love to know about it. That's, free and easy to use. Any other questions? Are we all running away to the next presentation?
Workers, 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 workers. Oh, no, I was answering. I was saying workers, workers, bro workers. Yeah, oh, I heard you.
You're asking about our bro implementation. That guy is in Germany right now.
Where's one? Hey, bro. Hey, bro. Hey, bro.
Wait,
So
no, you also
the question was
bro
about
stuff.
dealing with basically scaling with bro, and essentially what we did is we threw a lot of freaking resources at it. A lot. And the bro workers work, and then they die, and then we say, hey, stop it. So there's a lot of custom scripts. A lot were originally written in Perl. Ew. And they would basically say, like, hey, the bro worker stopped. That's dumb. And then force restart it. The bigger you get with, I know why you're asking that.
Are you the time guy?
There's a question on WLS. I was wondering if that was going to come up. So the Windows logging system is not available to the public. You have to have, what level of government affiliation do you have to get it? Do you know?
Magic.
You have to have some type of government affiliate. There's one guy who makes it and develops it, and it's freaking awesome. It's so much better.
Really awesome logs.
Unless are you a Snare guy? I can't see you. You're covering. He's like, yeah, I work for Snare, man. Okay, cool. Yeah, so WLS, it's very, very affordable. One guy, and he's very quick with feedback, and it's awesome. It's so awesome.
Yeah, the WLS logs and the Bro logs, they're super high fidelity and they're super useful and somewhat overwhelming.
If you literally just Google Windows logging system, you'll find the one guy's website. That's him.
Have you tried Sysmon instead? That's what we're doing now.
I don't know.
Sysmon, everything that does very similar.
I wasn't involved in the WLS PLC, and our guy who did wasn't here, so I just remember it went from Snare to WLS.
If you did it a couple of years ago, that was the only way to do it. But
Yep.
now there's a system called Sysmon.
Yeah.
And we put the hash or something that all goes to Splunk.
All right.
So
I'll check
there's
that out.
another way to do
Yeah,
it.
there's a lot more products in the security
Yeah.
space nowadays.
That's great.
Okay, I think we're good.
IOCS, you crack the MD5 and
Oh, everything. So the question for those who still care are still around, unless we have to leave right now. The question is about IOCs. What are we collecting? So is it just hashes, or what are you getting? I mean, it literally everything. If you were in Monzi's talk and he was like, "Oh, these attributable parameter," I mean, like just the tools alone that we have for pivoting from one point to another. We have we'll grab the domain registrant, we'll grab the domain, everything about the domain registration information, we'll grab the IP address, we'll grab name servers associated with that, we'll grab CNAMEs associated with that, we'll grab file hashes, all different types of file hashes, we'll grab file names, whether they're on the file system, resident on disk, or in memory, we'll grab everything. Anything you would think of as an atomic indicator, we'll grab, which is why we have so many indicators. Oh, yeah. yeah, this guy has to deal with them. Yeah, we get a lot, man. Yeah. Oh, yeah.